Story 1. That my grandfather, whom I absolutely adored, is a serial murderer. He is almost 80, and I never saw the signs, but I cannot unsee it. Story 2. That my cousin, my dad's brother's child, could be my brother. Dad told me, very drunk, one night and said he would deny it if it ever came up. My cousin and I are the only two redheads on this side of the family. Story 3. Showed me baby pictures of myself and told me it was my older brother, whom they killed before I was born for doing whatever I did 5 minutes ago. My sister even played along by crying and saying how much she missed him. I was 5 or 6 the first time. Story 4. As a 20-year-old newlywed, I called my mother completely shattered after the loss of my twins 16 weeks into my first pregnancy. She said, "It is for the best. You can barely take care of yourself, let alone 2 babies." It broke any sort of relationship I had with her. Story 5. I was in middle school and was being bullied by one boy very badly. He would bully me, hit me, and do anything he wanted. My mother said to me, "He hits you because he likes you." Story 6. My mom told me that my uncle, her brother-in-law, raped her. She also told me that she has been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and prescribed medication, but she decided she did not need it. Then she denied everything when I tried to offer support. I also found an email thread between my divorced parents, who took some time off from hating one another to joke about me being so dumb that all I would ever amount to would be a stripper. I was 13 at the time. Jokes on them. I am an accountant and will not cry when they are gone. Story 7. When I was a young girl, about 7, my parents were going to a party, so I stayed with a couple of good, old friends. They were like an uncle and aunt to me, husband and wife who happened to have their daughter and new son-in-law visiting. My parents left for their event but were suddenly called by my uncle, asking them to pick me up. Being a parent myself now, this is a very disturbing thing. His son-in-law had just admitted to being a pedophile. Story 8. After battling depression for years with therapy and antidepressants, my father told me, "You are not depressed. You are just lazy." Story 9. My mother stopped having sexual relations with my father after my sister was born. That would not be so alarming unless you knew my sister was born in 1965, and he told me in 1994. I really did not need to know that. However, my sister is the worst person in the world. Story 10. My father was almost assaulted or even murdered in the 1970s. He was 11 years old and leaving baseball practice, just walking home. A man in a car asked if he needed a ride. He said no because he already sensed the man was strange. The man kept insisting he accept the ride, but my father kept refusing. Finally, the man snapped and screamed, "Get in the car!" My father quickly ran and jumped over a fence, cutting through a train yard. The man chased him, but my father hid under a train quickly enough to avoid being seen. He said he stayed under there for 20 minutes before leaving and finally making it back home. Story 11. My mom said that when she was younger, they had a husky Malamute that could say simple words. It called her Mama. I don't remember why, but they had to give up the dog. Animal control was taking it away. The dog screamed, "Mama! Mama! Mama!" the entire time it was being dragged away. This has disturbed me for years, and writing this still disturbs me. To think about how my mom just let that happen and casually told me about it. I'm not okay. I couldn't do it. Story 12. My parents sat us down and said my uncle might abduct my sister and me for money. My dad told me, "If I die, it's your fault," then proceeded to die. He was revived. He has a huge scar down his chest now. My mom told me, "That's not the kind of girl you date publicly. That's the girl you have on the side." She did not like my girlfriend at the time. I am sure I can come up with many other examples. If we include things my uncle has said, the list would be too long. Story 13. My mom told me she doesn't care and doesn't believe that I tried to kill myself because of her abuse. Because, and I quote, "You have tried it before. Then stop abusing me." Story 14. I was very depressed as a teenager and attempted to hang myself. When my father heard about it, he put a knife to my throat and said that if I wanted to die, he would kill me then and there. Story 15. My mom told me when I was about 7 that her father and uncle abused her, which led to her fleeing the house at 14 and having to do many things to survive. That is why it hurt me so much when I told her what my brother did to me, and she did not believe me. Story 16. Dad, you know that one large pine tree with the giant black gash in it on the windy road in my hometown? That gash was made in 1967 when a guy I graduated high school with got drunk after a graduation party and drove headfirst into that tree. They said he died on impact and the car wrapped around it like a ribbon. They had to peel what was left of his body out of the car. I'm amazed that gash is still there. My siblings and I in the truck listening to this. What the heck? Story 17. I remember being about 16 or 17. My mom and I were arguing. I told her she didn't care about my feelings, and she responded, "The only feelings you have are between your legs." Story 18. If I did not have the values that I do, I would have aborted you. I did not want to have another baby. Thanks, Mom. I can really feel the love. Story 19. The doctor who performed my circumcision was very reluctant and tried to argue with my parents about it, but finally relented because he was the surgeon on call for obstetrics and gynecology maternity ward duties. Ultimately, it was my parents' decision, not his. It was very confusing for me because at the time, I had a narrative in my head about how evil and corrupt the medical field is for pushing unnecessary treatments for non-existent problems just to make money. I also thought about how religious institutions have disguised unnecessary rituals as proactive health measures. Maybe something about Kellogg a century ago who dreamed of a masturbation-less nation, etc. In my teens, I even flirted with some of the worst anti-Semitic conspiracy theories on online forums, trying to explain why this was done to me. It turns out the doctor was not only against it but also argued with my parents and even forced them to wait 2 more days to think about it, even though they asked for it within an hour of my birth. This shattered my worldview, but in a good way. I realized it wasn't corrupt, greedy doctors or religious zealots that forced this upon me. It was just my parents who had no other reason than that they wanted it to look like Dad's. Story 20. My father once killed a puppy by putting it in a cabinet with a space heater as punishment for biting him. The poor animal suffocated. He was a young adult when he did this. Less upsetting was finding out he is not my biological father. Story 21. My mom was extremely open with me as a child about how she did not want to have children and would have had an abortion if she had found out she was pregnant early enough to get one. I think she believes that her openness was helpful in a "you do not have to grow up to be a wife and mother if that is not what you want for yourself" sort of way. It really did not feel helpful as a child, though. Story 22. This is extremely ordinary for many people, but it changed a lot of things for me. Since I was around 4 or 5 years old, I have had a severe panic disorder as well as emetophobia. I am doing much better today, but when it started, it was awful. It was at the beginning of the manifestation of this phobia, and I was sick. I don't remember the exact situation, but I remember asking my dad many times why I was sick. I wanted to avoid any situation that could make me sick. My dad did not know because kids get sick so randomly, but I did not accept "I don't know" as a satisfying answer. So then he said, "It's because you went to bed too late yesterday." The year that followed was a nightmare for my parents. I wanted to go to bed by 8:20 p.m. at the latest, never later. I know that's a dream for most parents, but I would have an absolute panic attack if we were somewhere else, if the routine wasn't the same, or if I had insomnia. Many family members were upset by this, and my parents tried their best to help me live a normal life while respecting my way of coping with my anxiety. This event led them to become impatient with my anxiety and negatively affected much of my teenage years because of that. The small thing my dad said had a huge impact. Story 23. They told me I would be their slave after high school. I was never supposed to go to college or get my driver's license. Thank God for my grandparents. Story 24. I told my mother I was self-harming in high school, and she said that everyone does it, even her. I am in therapy now. Story 25. My dad told me that when I was an infant, my mom took me to a party where she became blacked out drunk. To this day, no one knows what happened to me during that party. Story 26. Today, a few hours ago, my father told me that his cousin, My uncle killed his wife and his children, and he injured his wife's sister. I don't know if she died or not. She is in surgery. Nobody knows why he did it. You will never know what is going through someone's head, even if that person is the one you love the most. Story 27. I don't remember the exact topic of the conversation, but my mom and I were on a walk, just chatting, nothing serious. She started complaining about my dad and then said, "I don't care if he cheats on me or has another wife somewhere. Why would you say that out of nowhere? That's my dad you're talking about." I was maybe 14 or 15, anxiously exploring my first romantic relationship. I did not have very healthy views on relationships as a teenager. Not until I met my now husband and spent a lot of time around him and his family. They are not emotionally stunted. Story 28. My father hit my mother somewhat regularly. When I was 13, I asked my mother if she would stop me if I was about to marry someone like him, and she said no. Story 29. How my dad would abuse my mom so badly that she tried to commit suicide, but he found her before it was too late. Just thinking about how that would have changed my whole life if he had never found her. This happened when I was a toddler. He sexually assaulted her, and she went through with 3 pregnancies, me and my 2 sisters. While in the hospital with my older sister, my dad used my mom's card to buy roses and take a girl on a date. She still hates roses to this day. Story 30. When I was a little over 16, I was raped by an ex-boyfriend. Word got around to my mother, and she told me she was raped and that it is something that happens to all women. She also implied that I was asking for it. We have not talked in 8 years. Story 31. My father would mentally and physically abuse my mother. In a last-ditch effort to make him understand that what he was doing was wrong, I asked him if he would be okay with me dating someone who treated me that way. He said, "Yes, you will, actually, and I can't wait to see that." I'm sorry, what? Story 32. When I was around 13, my father told me unexpectedly that everyone around me was constantly watching for anything they could use against me because they all wanted to hurt me. Story 33. This is something recent that she said, not to me, but I was right there and it was pointed to me. Whenever you feel sad and alone and miss them, just think of all the bad things they did to you and it'll be better. She wants me to live with her even after marriage. She was always the controlling, nagging, taunting, and strict parent to the point of making me suicidal. Even when I was going through that time in my life, after she saw all my self-harm scars, all she ever said indirectly was that if I attempted to die, she would just leave me be. I've never been a demanding or high-maintenance child, yet somehow she thinks I have done bad things to her. She's the one who gave up things willingly to put more time into me since I was a child. I don't deny the good things she has done for me, but I also never forced any of it on her. I was a child, not the adult. I did not make decisions for her or my father's life, so how is it my fault exactly? There are definitely other things she probably said to me that were more disturbing, but this one is still ringing in my ears ever since I heard it. So yeah, that's that. Story 34. It is what they have not told me. Numerous family members, family friends, neighbors, and the dog I grew up with have died. My mother, whom I talk to weekly, rarely tells me these things when they happen. She may mention them some months later in casual conversation. Story 35. My mother was a narcissist, so there were many difficulties. But what stands out is one time she found a journal I kept, which included a lot about how I hated my life and wanted to die. She proceeded to shame me for hating my life, telling me I had a good life and that this journal should not exist because thoughts become reality. I got her off my back by suggesting we burn the journal. I have tried for years to explain to people that my mother does not love me. Sometimes I wonder if maybe she did in her own way because growing up, people repeatedly told me she did and that I needed to try harder to understand. But then I realized one day, not once during this entire experience did she express the slightest concern that I was suicidal. Story 36. My father watched me as a baby when my mother went to church, and she said he watched pornography at the same time I was being taken care of by him. There is also the fact that I had incontinence issues until about 16 years old. Story 37. My dad suddenly, with no prior conversation, stared at me and said out loud that he wanted to give me a golden shower. My mother, on the other hand, told me she wished I had been assaulted in a dangerous situation she had purposely put me in. She also said that she did not regret killing my dog. Both have told me to kill myself multiple times. Story 38. In my city, they were building a new tunnel which required going through a cemetery. My dad had a job digging up graves with a shovel, breaking open the caskets, and moving the bodies. He described the various stages of decay they were in. The fresher ones were better because they didn't fall apart on his shovel, but the caskets were harder to break into. The older ones were easier to get into, but sometimes took quite a few trips to remove the whole body. The public was told the bodies were being shifted to other graves, but my dad said that actually, they were all thrown into one big pit and covered over. He made us promise to cremate him. Another story was that it was the middle of summer, and he and the others digging up bodies had run out of water. The only water source was a random tap. They ran the water for half an hour and then drank it. Within a couple of hours, all of them broke out in a painful red rash all over their bodies. Their boss made them finish the day. He was fine, but it was still a nasty thought as to what caused it. Story 39. My dad called me a derogatory name and told me to kill myself, but not in the house. All because my mom told me to study for my nursing finals and not bother lifting furniture into the house. I told my nursing director, and she referred me to a domestic violence shelter. To this day, I have post-traumatic stress disorder from that event and do not talk to him anymore. I avoid him and his family. My relationship with my mom is broken because she let him say that to me. Story 40. It's tough to pick just one, so I'll go with, don't actually tell a therapist what you are thinking because they will think you're crazy and lock you up. I took a chance and told one almost the honest truth. I'm still free. Most mental health problems are caused by her. Story 41. After my step-grandfather's funeral, his daughter brought a magazine with Andy, my grandfather, on the cover. Federal Bureau of Investigation most wanted for lynchings in another state, close though. He used to be the sheriff. My uncle, who was in drag, had gone to the funeral home with me. It was a small town in Arkansas in 1980. We walked in and people started using a slur. I stayed right by my Uncle Junior, also known as Nicky. Sadly, it is all true. Story 42. It is hard to pick because there are many smaller ones and mostly actions that are upsetting. However, it would either have to be the times when they would tell me in response to me being wrong and saying, "Oh, I thought that." They would always cut me off and say, "That's the problem, you thought," as if thinking for myself was some kind of offense to them. This was frequent because I was a really curious kid, and it eventually turned into me not feeling safe saying anything that I was not 100% sure about, to the extent that someone could ask what time it was, and I would say, "I think it is 3 o'clock," because even though I just looked at the clock, I did not dare make a factual claim. Even to this day, I struggle speaking directly, and it is like a trigger to me when people blame me for making assumptions because I freak out when I hear things fairly similar to, "The problem is that you did not know." Alternatively, it could be the time in middle school that my parents told me one day I was going to mess with the wrong kid and get beaten to a pulp, and it would be a wake-up call for me to get my act together. Like, who signs off on their child getting beaten up? Could only be those who do it themselves. It is disgusting that they figured I deserved that kind of thing, but given they gave it out just fine, I should not be so surprised. Story 43. My father told me he met his new partner at a social club he is a member of or was a member of. He learned about the club from his brother, who was also a member along with his wife. Story 44. My dad told me multiple times that I was a failed abortion and that my cousin's dad was my dad. Who knows? I am 6 of 7 kids. Story 45. I came here to say something like they told me I was not adopted. But these comments are really hurtful. Are you all getting therapy for this? Story 46. If I did not stop itching my ears because I was undiagnosed autistic and stimmying, they would fall off and I would not have ears. Story 47. Too many strange stories that show the cycle of abuse runs deep. The worst might be my mom explaining how she is a hero who saved her younger sister's life. She, at 14, encouraged her 6-year-old sister to play in a flooded culvert. The sister was pulled away by an undercurrent. Even now, when retelling the story, she focuses on how she knew her dad would be very angry if she came back home alone. She had to walk back to the area to find her sister. Thankfully, everyone was okay. I definitely do not have a similar near-drowning childhood story involving myself, her, and a stranger who was kind enough to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. A close second would be her explaining how she got back at her dad when he was slowly dying in hospice. The man was lying in his own mess. She stood over him and taunted him, as none of his other children were there. His biological mother and his first wife had passed some 20 years earlier, and his second wife, her stepmother, had just passed about 6 months earlier. Both from cancer, not foul play. For context, this was within the week of my teenage self finding out he passed away. Warm childhood memories. Story 48. I remember when I first started self-harming. I would bite down hard on my forearm. It was hard enough that I still have two small dot-shaped scars. When I decided to talk to my mother about it because I needed help and wanted to know what I should do, she got mad at me. She said I was doing it for attention, that nothing in my life would make it understandable, and that it was an insult to her and my father for all they did for me and my brothers. She said I was ungrateful. I was 12 and was being bullied by my entire class. I had also experienced serious post-traumatic stress disorder throughout my life before that. That moment still weighs heavily on me, even if she does not remember it. The good news is I have been clean from self-harm for 2 years now. I am 19. Story 49. My mom got drunk once and unloaded about how hard it was for her to be almost positive that I had been sexually abused as a child by either my uncle or my grandfather. But she would never have any proof and couldn't admit it to herself. She was so upset she threw up all over the bathroom that night, and I was really angry overall. In hindsight, I think she's totally wrong. I believe my uncle was physically abusive to me, and I have vague memories of being afraid of him after some kind of misunderstanding. At this point, I would almost bet that he just got frustrated and hit me. Her main issues were that they acted strangely around me. I was afraid of them, and she didn't understand. My mom is very smart and cool. While she sometimes plays the victim in her family, she seems to be universally adored. If people were unpleasant, it was because she was considered the smartest and best in the family, which caused resentment. I, on the other hand, was a weird and very autistic child. My uncle and grandfather hated me openly. As adults, they would say things like, "Man, you kind of turned out okay considering how annoying you were as a kid." But my mom loved me, obviously. I think she just couldn't accept that it was that simple. I annoyed them. I was strange. They hated me and being around me, which made me act weird and cower around them because it's painful to be hated and feel annoying all your life. At worst, a few times I may have frustrated my uncle enough to get a backhand here and there. That is really all it was. But this affected me for years. I believed her, and it really messed with my perception of my childhood, making me wonder if I was forgetting something. Story 50. My mother had an abortion because they did not like how I turned out. I was not a bad child, and neither was my brother. Story 51. My grandfather, an orthodontist, pulled some of my mom's healthy teeth when she was a young child without anesthesia as a demonstration for another doctor. Story 52. My best friend died when we were 19, and my mother said in a public Facebook post that she did not care because she had not liked her. However, it was sad that her daughter's friend had died. Yes, my mother's narcissistic personality disorder has been professionally diagnosed. My friend's mother saw the post. Story 53. Not me, but my sister. My mother told her tearfully that she should have disciplined us when we were children. Story 54. When I was about 13, apparently someone tried to kill my father. It was a case of mistaken identity. Thank God they realized it before they took his life. My parents did a good job of hiding this. Story 55. My dad and stepmom live in the countryside in a big house. It has 2 kitchens, 2 bathrooms, 2 living rooms, and 6 bedrooms upstairs. When I was a kid, they told me this was because 2 male twins married 2 female twins. They all lived together and built this house, dividing it to fit both families. One day, one of the couples fell pregnant, and the other couple, who had been trying for years, became very jealous. After the baby was born, whenever they had to take care of it, they mistreated the child. One day, they suffocated the child and killed them. They claimed the house was haunted. I was about 8 years old at the time and fully believed this story. I still remember the supposed room where this happened and how scared I was as a kid. Story 56. I keep telling this story, but when I was really young, maybe 7 or 8, I told my mom something along the lines of wishing I was a boy or wanting to be friends with boys. She got angry and told me the story of the rape and murder of Brandon Tina. She described in graphic detail how he was assaulted. She misgendered him the whole time, talking about him as if he were a girl playing dress up and tricking men into being friends with him. I didn't even know what sex or rape was, so that's how I was introduced to it. I don't really remember what happened afterward, but I was changed. She probably doesn't even remember it. I have no idea why she got so angry or why she felt the need to describe what sexual assault was to a child. Story 57. My mom said that my depression was because I was overweight when I was 14. She believed that losing weight would make me feel better. I was forced to exercise a lot, such as walking up and down steps on a hiking trail 14 times, 7 times up and 7 times down. I was put on Slim Fast. To be fair, I lost 15 pounds. However, it did not cure my depression. In fact, it got much worse, and it took another 5 years to see a therapist. I would not have self-medicated. Also, we tried using a scale for fun once, and she stopped me from having any more treats that day because of what it said. She did not do that with my siblings. Story 58. No matter how many white lies you try to sugarcoat yourself with, it will never cover up the fact that you did not study hard enough in school while you had the chance. Story 59. I have struggled with depression since a very young age. After a couple of years of hiding it and fighting alone, I could no longer take it and had a suicide plan. However, I decided to be honest with my parents and seek help. My mother said nothing. My father said, "Are you serious? After all the work problems we have, you tell me this." This happened about 7 or 8 years ago. There were many other issues, but I will share this one as well. My father and I never got along well. After a big fight, I left and stayed at my friend's place for a couple of days. 2 nights before I left, he said he wasn't even sure if I was his son. Because I did not return calls or anything, the police became involved, and I returned home after a couple of days. Around that time, I mentioned to a friend that I had many issues at home, mostly related to my father. He asked me if it was true. When I said yes, he responded that he knew because her parents had told him about it and said there was no way it was true because they were such good people. His expression basically said, "Guess what? Nobody believes you. I win. This happened 3 years ago." Story 60. My mother told me about her miscarriage after we went to our local post office and saw a man in a white truck with anti-abortion slogan posters taped to his vehicle. What caught her eye was one of these posters that said women who have miscarriages inflict this on themselves and should be charged with murder. My mom tried to tell this man that this was false, but after a minute she gave up, saying you can't talk to someone who thinks like this man. I knew she had had a miscarriage but didn't know the details. My mom told me in complete detail about her miscarriage, which ended up being incomplete and required medical intervention for the preservation of her health and safety. She received proper medical care and recovered. The couple of days she spent in the hospital recovering opened her eyes to what could have happened if timely care had not been given. I might add this was in the 1950s when abortion was illegal. She went on to have my brother several years later, which would not have happened without proper medical care. She probably would have either died or become infertile if she had not received medical treatment. She was almost in tears thinking that if she lived in a world where miscarriage was a crime, she would have at least been investigated. She told me she hoped and prayed that men like this man would not gain power or have the authority to make laws that penalize women for having miscarriages. She predicted that very disturbing outcome would happen. I found what my mother said to be disturbing, as people who think like this man are in power and have the means to do this. Story 61. I grew up very poor. I connected with my estranged father 3 months before he passed away, and he confessed to me that his income was over $100,000 for the majority of his adult life. Story 62. I do not have picture-perfect parents by any means, and I could offer a few things that did not feel good to hear when they were said, but nothing to the extent of what I have read here. I am very sorry to all of you that you did not have better parents. As a parent now myself, these stories are baffling. I cannot imagine. Story 63. From my mom. My dad tried to kill her because she had a baby from an affair. I also found out that my dad was not my biological father. From my father, he used to be a bully in school. The kind who would sexually assault other students he thought were gay. From my biological father. He said that I was a sick, terrible person who was doomed to be miserable for my entire life. Story 64. My dad told me my grandmother said this to him when he was a child. Sometimes I feel like gathering all you children and myself in the car, driving into a lake, and drowning us all. Story 65. One time my dad told me about when he had to pull bodies out of a plane crash as a first responder. I genuinely don't remember why he told me this, but I will never forget the details. I was far too young to hear it. Story 66. Whenever my mother was in a bad mood, she would say, "I will just go to the basement and blow my brains out." She said it often, and yes, we did have guns in the house. It is not a pleasant thing to hear your mother say when you are 8 or 9 years old. Story 67. My mother was left in her home country by her mother. Her mother's family did not take good care of her. After 15 years, her mother, my grandmother, returned and took her to Canada. My grandmother wanted her to socialize with people from their country. Grandmother dropped her off at a party where my mother was gang raped and became pregnant. She tried to tell her mother, but was told it was her fault. A 15-year-old dropped off at a party by her mother was gang raped by grown men. My mother became pregnant and had no idea what was happening with her body because she had not been taught anything. Grandmother figured it out after a few months and repeatedly traumatized, assaulted, and tried to kill my mother. I will never forget the look on my mother's face, tears streaming down, as she told me that my grandmother tried to throw her in front of a train and another time off a balcony. The story continues to be filled with terror, but this is absolutely the most disturbing thing she has told me. I am just glad she felt safe enough to tell her adult daughter. I always told her when I was younger that I could understand why she was very protective of us kids. I just knew something was not right. Story 68. My mother told me that before she conceived me, she became pregnant at 19 years old. Her father, my grandfather, told her to have an abortion or be kicked out on the streets. Unfortunately, my mother went through with the abortion. Story 69. My parents used to give our priest $2,500 in cash, and he would give them a receipt for $10,000. Churches never get audited. Apparently, many people had this arrangement with him. Then people ask me why I am an atheist. Story 70. My mother told me that I had been sexually abused by an older child on the school bus. I did not remember it, but when she mentioned it, I recalled bits, though nothing to confirm, just odd behavior by the adults around me. The following year, I brought it up, and she said she had not even told me in the first place. The disturbing part for me is that she gaslit me, and now that we have no contact, I see that she did it to me all the time. Story 71. Not me, but my sister. She made some choices after turning 18 that my father did not like. She moved far away to marry her long-distance boyfriend. My father is an alcoholic. He would get drunk and call her late at night just to berate her and say horrible things, leaving her in tears. She eventually stopped answering when he called. My mother told me about it years later, and my sister eventually told me too. He did eventually stop and apologize, and they have a much better relationship now. She, with her husband and children, moved back home because of the much cheaper cost of living. The children are the center of our father's universe. He is still an alcoholic, though, and ever since mother passed, he makes a point of texting regularly to tell us he loves us and is proud of us. Story 72. 2 things. 1. My father worked in crime scene investigations and would come home and talk about the cases. He once talked at dinner about photographing heads in boxes from a serial killer. 2. You don't deserve love and attention like your brother. You aren't special like him. Story 73. One day, I cried to my mother because I felt like my father did not want me. She paused and said, "You should talk to your father about that." After speaking with my father, I learned that after trying for 6 years to have a child, when my mother became pregnant, my father freaked out, saying she had tricked and trapped him with a baby. They had been married for over 6 years at that point. This experience affected me deeply, and I have not yet fully recovered. Story 74. If you have any doubt about my opinion and do not want to follow my instructions, then just leave my house. My father's instructions are: 1. Do not use the phone in front of me. Do not go outside the house. Stay where I can see you. Do not ask for anything other than college fees and food. I will often say that I have done a lot for you, and you have to accept it. According to him, he is paying for my oxygen and happiness, which is the happiness I managed to get from outside the house. Story 75. Telling me they love me after abusing me or dropping my sister and me off at a random Chester's house so they could go party. Then pretending none of those things ever happened and getting mad when I told them to never speak to me again. Or after every time they find some new way to contact me to try and guilt trip me about how they are lonely because neither my sister nor I ever come to visit. Story 76. I do not know about told, but they found it really funny to have dry sex in front of me until I threw a glass against the wall to make them stop. Story 77. I did not need to know about my mother's abortions in graphic detail, with so many emotions that I could not handle it. However, I managed to keep a straight face. Other forms of abuse made me subconsciously numb myself after that. I still cannot let myself feel fully because of how traumatic it was. Story 78. After my attempted suicide, when I came home after a few days under surveillance at age 15, the whole family gathered at the kitchen table for the first time. I can't really remember the details. It has been a few decades since then. I think my mother moderated the conversation and invited everyone to speak their minds to me. I can't recall what my mother or brother said, but what my father told me was really disturbing. That was the worst and meanest thing anyone has ever done to me, showing me that they want nothing to do with me anymore. The reason I did it was partly because I felt I was disturbing the peace and that everyone would be better off without me. I was the scapegoat in this extremely toxic family. He made it all about himself, portraying himself as the victim of my wrongdoings and guilt-tripping me again. Guilt-tripping was their way of showing love. Story 79. When I asked my father if I was circumcised, I was told that I was. I was 11 years old, understood fully what it meant, and had no issues after that. Just accepted it and moved on with my life because it was not disturbing. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.